Welcome to our midweek sermon for the week commencing the 16th of August. This week we are looking at Isaiah chapter 2 verses 22 all the way through to chapter 4 verse 1. It's quite a long passage, but really it is just chapter 3 that we are focusing on this evening. And today we're thinking predominantly about trust. In whom do we trust? And I was struck as I read this passage of the boats travelling from France full of immigrants for asylum seekers trying to get to England. I wonder what they were trusting in. Perhaps they were placing their trust in their inflatable dinghies in a tiny bit of rubber and air. Perhaps they were placing their trust in a deity that they had never known before that moment. I wonder if they placed their trust in those people who they pay thousands and thousands of pounds to try and come to the UK on the promise of a better life, with no guarantee of them actually getting here. Their view, their determination, I would wage, comes from a place that even with the most death from COVID in all of Europe, with the health service waiting times so long as we would see them, the government so poor at the moment, the worst recession of all the G7 nations, and all of the other condemnation that comes when you read the tabloids, tarnish this country with an image that is, quite frankly, not one you would probably want to come to. But to them it still represents a utopia. Even with all of the failings, there is something fundamentally special about the UK to them that makes it worth travelling through all of those countries, through all of those hardships, in the back of lorries. There's something about the UK being a utopia for them, a place of a better life. I wonder if after all the time we have had, you could picture your own vision of utopia. Is it the same as it was before lockdown, or has it changed a little bit? What does the best looking society look like to you, I wonder? What does utopia look like in your home at the moment? Is it a place with sunshine, fun, family and food? Is it a place with order where there is no pain, no crime, no viruses, where the leaders make the right decisions, where innocent people don't get hurt? Is it a place where you can get your hair done, where people have nice clothes, where each one is dressed up and people have nice things? Perhaps where people have jobs. Or better yet, we have all we need without needing to work to have it. Perhaps if I asked you, what does your utopia look like? You'd say that's too difficult a question to ask. So perhaps a simpler question is, who would you invite to dinner? What does the best dinner look like in your home at the moment? What does utopia look like? I would wager that there are countless similarities between our view of utopia and that of the asylum seekers. And I think this view of utopia is what lies at the heart of our story today. But there is a different question. In whom do we trust to build our utopia? And are they taking us towards it? Or are they taking us towards destruction? Who do we trust to build utopia? For the Jewish nation, they are God's chosen people. They are blessed. They have been told how to live. They have a relationship with God. They have countless scriptures, stories, proof of God, proof of what he has done for them in the past. And they wanted a human king. They wanted a king so they could be like everyone else. And they followed him. And they followed his successors. And what should have been a utopia, a place of God's people, became something very, very different. People who no longer were trusting in God for their success. They were parading their sin, it says. It's not very often you can read a piece of scripture and just say, there doesn't need to be much more I need to add to that. But that is the case today. I could just leave you with this one line, but I won't. From the very outset of chapter 2, there is a linking verse. One verse that ties these two things together. And it's a thought. And it's an imperative. And it says, stop trusting in mere humans. Stop trusting in mere humans. I have been dismayed over recent weeks and months by the criticism of the government. Why doesn't the government tell us clearly what to do? They genuinely have. Stay home, travel only if necessary, protect the NHS. It doesn't seem complicated. And yet if you go to Nepal or Germany or China, if you are confirmed as COVID positive, you are most likely getting a visit from the police. And then the government would be seen as oppressive, wouldn't they, in this country? They'd be misusing their power. The government would have failed again. Can you imagine that? The police knocking on your door and saying, you've got COVID, stay home or else. I read an interesting article in the newspaper the other day, and it was attacking the Church of England, as many of these newspaper articles have a habit of. And it was mostly around the fact that our bishops had stayed quiet and they hadn't really led during this situation. But it also, as it often does, went on to talk about the place of state and religion, and pointed to the people clapping for the NHS and stated that the UK's new national religion, its new church, its new belief, the place we place our faith and hope, is actually the NHS and not the church. Now, I certainly don't fully ascribe to that notion. I don't think so. I think COVID, if anything, has demonstrated that the church is more flexible than anyone imagined. But it has highlighted we so badly want to trust in mere humans. The NHS brought people together in a way the church used to. We want so badly to trust in mere humans, in the doctors in that case, in the nurses, in the care staff. But we also want to trust in other humans, don't we? We trust in the police to keep us safe, the leaders to protect, to guide, to govern, the doctors to heal and restore us. And yet when they don't say what we want them to say, in the way we want to hear it, well, we just ignore them, don't we? And then we tear into them. And we tear down that version of utopia, because my version of utopia is better because I get to do what I want to do within it. And this is absolutely nothing new. Isaiah 3 could in fact be talking about our world right here and now. You can almost hear God. What is it you're clapping for? What is it you are cheering for? Jerusalem, who are your heroes? But what are you successful? By what are you measuring that success? Is your utopia built by the hands of man or the hands of God? Because whilst things are going well for you, whilst you're living out some form of civilization, you are not the people God called you to be. You can clap and cheer all you like, but your utopia is wrong, Isaiah is writing. Stop trusting in mere humans. Why hold them in esteem, verse 22 says. Chapter 3 begins, see now, the Lord Almighty is about to take from Jerusalem and Judah both supply and support. And for what reason? It is corrupt. They are walking around in sin. These are God's chosen people. They have all the trappings of a successful society. But it's a sham. It is a society reflecting the image of man, not the image of God. It's all based around what you have and what you do. Nearly the entire chapter 3 is just littered with personal labels, possessions, job titles, labels of political position, occupations, gender, age, positions in hierarchy, positions in society, positions in households, positions in churches, all those things which people hold so dear and define them. Say, this is me because I'm a whatever. And they're all held up here as a problem. Because each one of those forms a complete society. But nowhere in there does it reference God. Now, we love labels in our society, don't we? They give us a sense of familiarity, of expectation. They help us to orientate and know what to expect, who to talk to when we want something, and actually what we can expect to get back from them. Labels help us to orientate, and there's nothing wrong with labels. But labels are also a problem. Labels of youth might make us think of young people up to no good, of behaving rashly, or simply of just having no experience whatsoever. So why would we listen to them? Labels we have heard a lot about recently of race, of those around migrant status or political parties. Labels can bring us together in the most profound way and give us a sense of unity. God's chosen people is a powerful uniting verse. Christian should be a powerfully uniting word. But they can also be a means through which we can have division. I want this in my utopia, this label, or the person with that label, but not the person with that one. I want employed, but not the unemployed. I want Christians, but not atheists. I want heroes, but not peasants. And our leaders have to try and find a way to knit all this together, assuming we like the label of the party they represent. We trust our leaders to bring order, to manage that supply and support. They are responsible for what people want, what people need, and what is allegedly best. And as long as they hold those three things in tension, everything's okay. But when they start to drift too far, when governments are run for the benefits of the individual or individuals, people become frustrated and angry. But in its most basic form, the government needs to provide food, water, and safety for its population. And that has always been the case, even back in Genesis. And that is what they're getting wrong in Isaiah. If we think of Jacob's son Joseph, one of the things he is regarded for is building up a supply of grain in Egypt, which brings his brothers back together. It is that unites them. They come to find the grain. Moses is in the desert and they are grumbling that they are hungry, and then God gives them manna, that they need water, and a rock is broken open and water comes from it. Jesus fed 5,000 people. Time and time again, it is not man providing for the people, but God himself. They give God the glory. for what he has done. I wonder how often do we give God the glory when we go to the supermarket? Hey, thank God there is food on the shelves. Thank God I can get my shopping this week. When you turn the tap on and say, thank God I have clean water when so many in this world go thirsty. How often do we go to bed at night knowing we are safe, yet in some countries you go to bed and don't know whether the government will storm your house and take your family? These are real issues in our world. All of these things which the Jewish nation hold on in such high regard, those things they think they have created through the strength of their arms, through their education system, through their training, are gifts God has given them. But they assume they are their own achievements, their version of utopia. They're building it, not God's. Verse 8 and 9 says, Jerusalem staggers, Judah is falling. Their words and deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them. They have brought disaster upon themselves. That starts with the leadership. And then it flows down into the people. The leader leads, and maybe he's a bit self-interested. And then the people beneath him become self-interested and start to get more. And then more people become self-interested and they start to get more. And soon you have this society that is self-serving, not God-serving. And God is not happy with what he sees. God is going to dismantle it. Verse 1 to 3 says, all supplies of food and all supplies of water, the hero and the warrior, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counsellor, skilled craftsman, and the clever enchanter. The entire hierarchy, their entire society, their ability to build, their justice system, their spiritual discernment, their security, their defence, their armies, their soldiers, their communities, the leaders of those communities are being pulled apart because there is rot all the way through this society. And things will get so bad, so far out of balance in all of this, that they will be so busy trying to defend their view of utopia, that thing they've been so desperately trying to build together, to try and get back to normal, to maintain the brokenness that they were oblivious to. They will end up destroying everything. There will be a rotating door of leadership. How often do we see that in our society at the moment? You fail once and you leave. We see a rotating door of prime ministers in this country at the moment. But we get to this point where the inexperienced people will be in charge. The entire view of biblical patriarchy will be turned upside down. The children will be ruling over the parents. The youths will be the leaders. The inexperienced will be the leaders. They will reach out for a human after human leader, trying the next one, trying the next one, trying the next one. A man will seize one of his brothers in his father's house and say, you have a cloak, you be our leader. Take charge of this heap of ruins. You have a cloak, you be the leader. But in that day he will cry out, I have no remedy, I have no food or clothing in my house. Do not make me the leader of the people. Verse 6 says, literally, you have no clothing other than a cloak. We don't even have a cloak. You be our leader, because you've obviously got a piece of clothing and we haven't. You're doing better than we are. And the man responds, I can't even feed myself. How can I feed a nation? And rather than getting on their knees And rather than worshipping God, and rather than asking God to show them who the right person to lead is, they just keep making mistakes. It will all lead into their view of utopia tearing itself apart. And God will take his position in judgment, it says. This whole passage has been about one thing and one thing only: pride. Pride. They are trusting in their own ability, profiting and seeing the profits as blessings. They probably are thinking that they are getting all of this finery, the bangles, the headbands, crescent necklaces, the earrings and bracelets and veils, the headdresses and the anklets and the sashes, the perfume bottles and the charms, the signet rings and the nose rings, the fine robes and the capes and cloaks, the purses and the mirrors and the linen garments and the tiaras and shawls. All material wealth. Verse 18 to 23 talks about that. The wives' finery, all of this stuff, this opulent view there that we heard about. The wives' finery is obtained through their husband's exploitation. All of that has been gotten by the oppression of the poor and the weak. Calvin says, wherever dresses and splendour are carried to excess, there is evidence of ambition, and many vices are usually connected with it. For whence comes luxury in men and women, but from pride? Wherever dress and splendour are carried to excess, there is evidence of ambition, and many vices are usually connected with it. For whence comes luxury in men and women, but from pride? They trusted in their wealth, they trusted in their position. They created a society in which you could make more by taking more, by changing the gospel, by worshipping other gods, by having the leader they thought they wanted or the one they thought they needed. They built their utopia. And rather than the state of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, being a reflection of God's grace to them, God's blessing upon them, it had become vile and it had become sinful. And what does God think about it? What does God think about their opulence? Surely these are blessings of his. And he turns around and he says through Isaiah, what do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, declares the Lord Almighty. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, declares the Lord Almighty? Can you imagine hearing those words? Wow. Let that language just fall over you for a minute. What do you mean by crushing my people? My people. We are not ours. We are on loan. We are made in God's image, each and every single one of us, regardless of our race, of our position, of our country of birth, even of our faith. We are made in God's image. These are God's people. Whether we know him and have a relationship with him, it doesn't make a difference to whether we belong to him or not. What do you mean by crushing my people? You know, we've lived through some of this quite recently, haven't we? We've lived through food taken away, churches shut, people losing their jobs, the police pulled left and right, migrants being told they're not welcome, that sense of loss and devastation. We are watching the taking apart of our society. And yet in that, we are also seeing people finding spirituality in new ways, more people taking Alpha classes online, more people watching Holy Trinity evening prayer services than we ever see in church. More people attending morning worship than we ever get in the building. And behind those individual numbers we see, there are believers, there are non-believers, and there are children who have drifted away from church. Behind each one of those numbers isn't necessarily one person, it could be 5 people. God in verse 10 says, "Tell the righteous it will be well with them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their deeds." Tell the righteous it will be well with them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their deeds. God is asking for us to trust in him. The gospel, if nothing else, is one of transformation. Trust requires a personal submission, a letting go, an entering into. I would wager that those people jumping in those dinghies and travelling 21 miles in sea, in shipping lanes, in wind and rain, exposed to the elements, have much more of a humble relationship with whatever deity they believe in, as they have no choice. They are broken people. Their view of utopia is over there. It's something else. They can only throw themselves before that deity and say, "I have no choice. I have to go forward. Lord, protect me." For us, if we live lives transformed by the gospel, then we have nothing to fear. But if we build our own utopia at the expense of others, if we give ourselves the glory, then our fragrance will be a stench before the Lord, Isaiah says. So back to our view of utopia. Is it full of people like us? Is it full of people like you and me? Who's built it? Who are the people you are looking for to be in there? Why are they there? Are they there because they serve a purpose? Are you relying on them to do something? Where are the people of different skin colour, of different nationality, of different economic backgrounds? Is there space for them too? Or are we crushing God's people and grinding the face of the poor? Whilst we live in a world, a nation at the moment that subjectively is broken, the UK has money, food, water, stability in some forms, security in most forms. Who are we to grind the faces of the poor? Will they be in utopia, or have they been left out? And I suppose with that goes that question, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid of people taking our jobs? Are we afraid of people taking from the state? But behind that is a much bigger question, isn't it? Because that takes us right back to those early stories of the Bible. It is God who provides the food. It is God who provides the water. It is God who provides. So if our fear of people coming here is based in losing something, then actually we need to look at who we are placing our trust in, don't we? Because if we're worried about losing something, our trust is in the government. Our trust is in the society. Our trust is in all those systems built by man that Isaiah takes apart. But if we trust in the Lord, then the Lord will provide our food, the Lord will provide our water, the Lord will provide our security. And yes, he may use governments to do that, and yes, he may use other means to get that through. But the righteous, it will be well with them, for they will enjoy the fruit of their deeds. Again, is there room in your utopia for people who aren't like you? And if not, where is your trust at this time? Amen.